Brought to you by Telehelping, a virtual assistant staffing company for professionals.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cody Hall. I'm the host of The Faces. Entrepreneurs are people too, and the founding CEO of Telehelping, a virtual staffing organization, and the herein sponsor of my podcast. So again, I appreciate Telehelping for allowing me the opportunity to talk to wonderful people like Emil. Sir, how are you doing this morning?
Hey, Cody. Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me this morning. Appreciate it.
Emil, I'm super excited to chat with you. Like I was saying before, we talked to a variety of accountants, lawyers, and CFAs and other people in the finance industry. Rarely do I get the opportunity to chat with someone who is an accountant for, say, lawyers. Two of my three primary class of clients. So really excited to chat with you about that today. But before I run off with that, let's tell people, who is Emil? Who are we chatting with here today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Emil. I'm the founder of Council CPAs, Cody. We're a CPA firm here in California, in LA area, working only with law firms. That's our the only clients we work with. I used to work with other clients in the past, but we switched gears and only work with law firms going forward since some time ago. So that's what I do during my days, but during 8 to 5 or whatever the regular day is. But then, as we were just chatting, there's we have a life before 8 a.m. where we wake up and spend time with the family, and then after 5 p.m., 6 p.m., we spend time with the family again. So I'm a father of two. I have two boys, 8 and 12. Married, and we live here in Glendale, in LA area. I didn't grow up here in the States. I grew up in Sweden. My family moved to Sweden when I was a baby. I was born in Iran, Armenian heritage, born in Iran. My family took us to Sweden right after the Iranian Revolution and the Gulf War with Iraq. So that's a long story. That's a several hours discussion itself. But we moved to Sweden. I grew up there. I graduated there from university. I worked in Sweden for a few years at Ernst & Young in Stockholm before I moved out to California in 2007. So I got here back then and got into the grind. And to be frank, I moved here because I met my wife. We were not married at that time, but we met and said, what, why not? Let's move to California, see what it is. Could be worse places to move to.
Definitely could be worse places to move to.
So that's what it is. I got here, started working at the firm for a couple of years, and this is a good story, actually. I haven't told this for a while, but I got it 2007. We got married summer of 2009. So pretty quickly we got married. It was a good fit. April, right after the tax season, April, they laid me off. Not only me, but it was like 30 people in the firm. This is 2009. Yeah. Keep in mind, this is a financial crisis, and it was not good times. So a month or 2 months before I was getting married, relatively new to this country, I got laid off. Fantastic start. So that was the start of my journey towards having my own firm, and then gradually moving into law firms and what's and not. So that's a short story of who I am, Cody.
Well, that's great, because two things. One, it's always because of a woman, right? I myself found my way across the country once or twice, following somebody, right? But then, I find wonderful in your story is your origins. My great aunt, lived in Iran for 8 years in the 70s. So her husband was a Lockheed Martin contractor, and he was there during the time before, the revolution. And she loved it. I've talked to her at length about it, and she lived there for 8 years straight before the revolution took place. And so she just tells me, wonderful stories about her time there and how they enjoyed it. So
I'm looking at pictures from my parents when they were younger and when they were partying and all that. Oh my gosh, like Iran before revolution was like worse than what California is right now.
It's so funny you say that, because I just saw something online yesterday, and they're like, tell us where this is. And I was like watching it, and you're watching and you're like, well, these are slightly more tan hippies. You're like watching, like, who are these? They look like you could be in California. Should be in San Francisco. And like, oh, this is Tehran, like 1972. And you're like, wow. And so that's a beautiful transition. And I love when people have the pathway and story. And so, where were you living in the States before California? Where did you?
I moved to California straight from Sweden, from Stockholm to California. So
You're
in the
spoiled.
States, the only place I lived in Glendale, California. That's the only place I lived in.
Well, that's great. I lived in so one of my good friends is a PD officer and SWAT team member there in Glendale, and so I used to live in Fullerton for many years. I lived in Santa Monica for a while, Culver City. So I've made my way around the Orange County, the greater LA region for numerous years, depending on what startup I was in at the time.
Where are you at now, Cody?
I'm in Vegas right now, but you
Vegas.
can find me anywhere between Vegas, Napa, and Guadalajara, Mexico. That's generally depending on what time of year or what stage of life. I'm getting ready. You have two sons. I'm getting ready to welcome my second son here in May 1st, and so
congratulations!
I'm very excited.
Exciting.
Two sons, and I'm done. And then I got this one over here. And so, we're 3 and out. No more.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Congratulations. That's amazing, man. Enjoy it.
I appreciate it. And so you have 2 sons. How's it raising a son this time of the world?
I love it, man. I think some people are just meant to be parents, and even though I'm going to be frank, because I'm sure my wife will listen to this and she will argue with me, I'm not spending as much time with them as I should because I'm working more than I want to do. But it's getting better and better as organized we're getting, and I'm spending a lot more time with them now than I did in the past, by the way. But it's fantastic, man. It's like they change your perspective of life in a way that I would never imagine being a parent before. So it's amazing, man. They play soccer, they do sports. You go with them, you enjoy it. You kind of live your childhood over again somehow.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. I love it. It's a challenging, obviously. You're a parent, you're working, you're running a business, you have team members, you have responsibilities, but you got to learn. And I'm still working on it. And I'm not nowhere close to being perfect, but you got to learn to shut it off. When you're going home, it's off. For the time you're spending with the kids, you're turning it off, and then when they go to bed, you can do whatever you want, obviously. But I think that's the key for young parents or young kids' parents. I don't know if I'm young anymore, but my kids are young, so you need to learn that, and that's the key, I think.
No, I agree with you, and I spend most of my morning. I wake up really early, and I try to be done. Sometimes today would be a great case. Normally, yesterday afternoon, if you looked at my calendar, I would be done today at 1:00, right? 1:00. I will not make things to do because there's never an business owner. There's never a shortage of things you can be doing. All right. However, I will not move them up unless they're scheduled or urgent. And so, today I probably would have been done at 1:00. Turns out three new meetings. I can't turn down sales calls, right? And if someone wants to chat, they want to chat. But it's a challenge. I selfishly would love to be hanging out with my son rather than working. It's a desire wise. I'd much rather be doing that. However, that's the tough part. That's the entrepreneur. That's the adult that requires for our kids to have what they need, the life that we want them to have. All right. And so it's a sacrifice piece.
It is a sacrifice from both ends. You're sometimes sacrificing family, sometimes you're sacrificing the business, but you got to have a balance. Somehow you got to find that balance, whatever works for you. For you wake up early, for example, and do your stuff, and you finish at 1:00. For me, I can't do that because certain things have to be done throughout the year. The team is coming in, so I'm spending a little bit. I'm waking up. I'm taking.
It definitely is a March too. So you are in tax season.
We're in tax season.
it's interesting that you are an accountant specifically for lawyers. And, I've had the opportunity throughout my time at telehelping is occasionally I take on consultant relationships with some of my clients who don't necessarily have sales and marketing experience. So I have the opportunity to, they need people and they realize that they also need someone to get them in the right direction. So I recently had an opportunity to work with an accounting firm that is one of my clients, and they are extremely niche. And so, which I thought to be unique. I generally think of a CPA as someone, they'll file taxes for anybody, right? They'll do accounting for anybody. You just tell me where the numbers are. And so how is it being niched to lawyers?
Yeah. I'm, as I mentioned, I'm not always been niched. I started as a general practice. As I mentioned, 2009, I got, laid off,
Of course.
got married. I need to do something. So I was taking on I started my practice right after that. So I was just taking on anyone who knocked on the door, anything they needed. Like, you just do it. Just give me whatever I need to survive. But you pretty quickly realize, like, this is not, if you want to build a business, like, some people don't want to build the business. Like, CPAs, typically they want to build a practice. I'm working in it. It's like my own business. I'm just doing my work. But that was not my kind of desire. I always wanted to build a business. It happens to be within accounting because that's what I'm good at, but it could be really any business, honestly. So you realize quickly that it's not scalable to do everything for everybody. First of all, you're doing your clients a disfavor, because if you don't really understand the issues, especially like for a CPA, because we're so in-depth involved with our clients, and we help them with a lot of things. It's not only filing a tax return. We're helping them throughout the year with back office, accounting services, CFO services, budgeting, forecasting. And if you don't understand the industry, I think it's very, very hard to provide a service to your clients. So that's when I saw, what, I do not want to do this for everybody. I just want to pick my own niche. I want to be the best at it. I want to be known for it and just provide value. And I think that's the way to do it. The way the industry, or the way really business world is going, I think it will benefit any professional really to niche down. And just because there's plenty of clients, just let's be honest, like, I can't even serve a fraction of lawyers out there. Why would I even go out after doctors, dentists, entertainment industry if I can't even handle the industry I'm in? So
that's a really good point. And, that's something I had a conversation with other clients that I've had the opportunity to consult with as well. They were trying, like, well, I'm like, who's your client avatar? And they're like, anyone between left and right. If they will pay me, I will do their service. And I was like, that's great. Well, let's narrow it down. Like, what's your use case here? What problem are you trying to solve? And, I think that's, we at telehelping, we experience our largest growth when we niched. And so we initially started working with CFAs, and we're like, hey, listen, we work with lawyers, doctors, healthcare abroad, all marketing companies. And we're like, okay, well, we're doing well, but we weren't going anywhere. And I was like, you know what? I really like the CFA profile. Like, I like the finance industry profile. Let's stick with finance. That's going to be our primary spearhead. From that, as you're spearheading, we realize that people who, when we're working with CFAs in the finance world, we're pretty applicable to accounting. And in the same hand, we're pretty applicable to lawyer. And so we realized that while CFA was our primary thing, we had other folks coming to us that weren't our specialty, but that we were able to do well enough to say, if they're not those three, we generally don't do business with them. And I'm fairly honest with folks to say that, hey, listen, I could find you a virtual assistant, and then they'll probably do well. However, we're not going to know what their life's going to be like. Like, I can tell you what a VA is going to look like at an accounting firm, at a legal firm. And so what you're saying, and the same thing that the previous accounting firm I worked with as a consultant, is like, I know my client. I know their pain points. Right? I know what they're going through, how they operate, where they're trying to save, where they're trying to write off, what is applicable to them under the tax code. And that allows you to not only, do a great job for them, but also make it a lot easier for you because you know what you're working with.
Not only for me, but for my team, right? Like, because my team is the ones really working with the client day to day. And if we can put systems and processes in place for same type of clients over and over and again, it's a lot easier for them to work. And we've seen it. We've seen a significant change in the way our team is coming into the office, the way they're happier, because it's one way of doing things. I'm not asking them to file a sales tax return for restaurants, and then a payroll report for doctors, and then, I don't know, another thing for lawyers. I'm just asking them to do these things for lawyers, and they do it fantastic. I think it's fantastic. It's a win and win for everybody. Yeah. It's easier for you as a business owner, for your team, but also mainly for your client. They get value from you.
No, and I love that value. I love when people talk value. So many folks are concerned about cost when they should really be wondering what they're getting for their dollar, not so much, how much the thing itself is the price wise. In the legal world, do you niche with, is there certain types of lawyers that you work with more frequently than other lawyers?
We work mainly with hourly or like billing clients that are billing regularly. Okay. Because they need more of our help in the back office. We help clients with their billing process, for example. That's a big cash flow hurdle for law firms, where the partners typically, for solo and small law firms, where their partner or they have an office manager doing the billing, and they get so overworked and overwhelmed that they delay the billing for months. I've seen cases where they haven't billed their clients for 3 or 4 months. So problem with that is not only that you have cash flow issues, you don't collect immediately. You sit 3-4 months where you could use that money to regrow the business. But also, if you don't bill right away, the clients forget about the service. They forget about the value you provided. And it's a lot harder for you to collect the full amount 4 months from now, rather than if you send out the invoices right away. So what we do, we help the law firms with that process and speed up the billing by taking that over. It's not rocket science. We're not going to the moon. It's nothing. It's like going to the gym. You have a trainer. The trainer is not going to work out for you, but the trainer is going to make you do things in the right time so that you actually do it. Same way for us, kind of same way, but we actually do the workout for the clients because we actually do the billing. We do the billing for them so that we can send out invoices every 2 weeks or maximum once a month, so that we can collect faster for cash flow perspective, but also so that the clients pay, because 3-4 months from now, it will be harder to collect the bill 4 months from now rather than if you invoice right away. So,
no, Emil, that's great, and I understand, because I know, being that we have 20 or so % of our book of business as lawyers, they are often the times the ones with the cash flow problems. And when I'm chatting with them, and we at one point had a really big bolstering, accounts receivable, right? People wasn't paying on time, and we went through and we just cut those types of clients. We identified them and moved away from them. And so we don't do bolstering AR anymore. However, I see with lawyers that sometimes they'll be a little late. They're the ones most of the time that are late that I work with, because they're like, hey, we're trying to collect. We bill for things and then we don't really get paid right away, because I find that in the legal world, people get what they receive and then they oftentimes forget to pay the lawyer. And so are you doing collections for them as well?
So we're not a collection agency. And majority of the time, we don't need to involve collection agencies in the process, but we do follow up with them. So we send out the bills, and then we have a process in place based on what the client wants. It's different from each client, but we follow up with their client, my client's clients, to make sure we collect the funds. If 1 out of 100, not even that, probably 1 out of 300-400, we have to get a collection agency involved, and that would be different. We have to outsource that because we don't have that expertise, but we typically don't need it.
No, that's great. Yeah, I hate sending people a collection. I don't like doing collection. It's just not fun. Oftentimes, if it's only a small invoice, I'll just write it off. So versus trying to collect on it. And
typically, when you work with the client, if you have the right tone, right communication, and you or have the open correspondence with the client, typically they pay. They might argue a little bit, then you cut it down for 20-30%, but that's a lot cheaper than sending it to collection agencies. So
Correct. Yeah.
So you got to work with the clients, but there are ways of reducing that risk by getting on top of it regularly.
No, that's great. So, in the lawyer world, do you find, well, it's great. So you are filing for their taxes for them as well, and you're doing kind of the bookkeeping for lawyers. So you're a full service CPA firm, bookkeeping firm for lawyers.
Correct.
Oh,
Correct.
That's great. And so you're really busy right now.
Yeah, we're busy. About that. That's that. After 16 years in business, you get immune to tax season. You just do it. So it's nothing unusual. But the tax portion is, we do the tax portion because we have to. It's a compliance. The IRS and the states require it. But that's not the fun part for us, and it's not where we provide value. The value added services is everything up to the tax preparation. We prepare the numbers, we give the numbers to the client, we explain it to them so they understand their numbers, because a lot of lawyers don't understand their numbers, believe it or not. Like they're great attorneys, but they do not understand numbers. So we kind of put it in front of them in plain English. We make decisions, we help them make decisions based on actual data, which leads us to the tax planning, which is the most important part of what we do. We do everything else to have the data, to do the tax planning, to reduce the tax liability as much as possible in a legal way, obviously. And then obviously thereafter, we just file a return because everything is done. The tax preparation is just a breeze at that time.
No, I don't tell many people, but I'm formally educated in the accounting space, just because I don't want to give anyone any type of finance advice.
Don't tell anyone.
No. I'm actually going to delete this recording. But I when I studied for my MAC, I had no desire to want to be a CPA. Actually, when I was doing the MAC, everyone except me was like, I'm going to take the CPA exam. And I was just there because I knew I was an entrepreneur and I had no clue what was going on in the finance department. And so when I looked at like a P&L, I was like, I could tell you beforehand, like, oh, well, this kind of looks weird. Now I can look at it and it says, what is this? And it gives me that skill set, which is the only reason why I went to study in the first place. A former board member of mine was saying, hey, great, you have the visionary CEO thing down, but you don't know a darn thing about accounting and finance. Like if you don't learn this, you're always going to have a glass ceiling. You're never going to be able to run a company of substance. And so, and telehelping couldn't be what it was today if I didn't learn those things, because I would have buried the company not knowing how to manage, cash versus accrual, or manage the AR and the PR. So learned a lot of those things. What often, you mentioned that they don't know the numbers. What oftentimes is the hurdle for lawyers when they're managing their own finances?
It's just done incorrectly. It's like, we used to take on tax clients in the past. We don't do that anymore for clients that just want us to prepare returns for them. They provided us a piece of financials. Based on that, we cleaned it up a little bit and then prepared a tax return for them. But we noticed that you cannot do that, because what am I doing? How am I different from millions of other CPAs if I'm just going to take numbers, provide it to me, and just give them a piece of paper, which is the tax return, back to them? So we stopped doing that. And we were noticing that many times those financials were incorrect. So what does that mean? Not only that the tax return gets filed incorrectly, well, we can clean it up and file it relatively quickly, but you've been looking at those numbers as a business owner, as a CEO of your own law firm throughout the year, and made your decisions. I'm assuming you're making your decisions based on data, because that's how real businesses are run. And you made decisions based on incorrect data. And what are those? What could it be? Oh, what could it be that it make a big deal? Well, you got a bank loan, for example, $500,000 bank loan. You deposit it into the bank. Yes, that's correct. And they record it as income. That's not income. Like bank loans, it's just a loan. It's not. It should not go on your profit and loss statement. It should go on your balance sheet. So automatically with that transaction, you exploded your income with $500,000. So you think you made $500,000 more than you actually did in this case. Could be devastating for smaller firms. So it those are the things that they were doing wrong, and I do not want to be involved in those kind of transactions. So we just stopped that. We just created our own bookkeeping department. Say whoever want to join us, we have to do their bookkeeping, so that we don't mess up anything.
No, I mean, Mel, that's a great way. We recently have started having clients ask for virtual staff members outside of our competency. A good example would be IT, right, or engineering. You know, some of our clients are larger, and so they're expanding their own internal departments, their own internal capabilities. And you know, we had one. We did some tech hires for some IT support folks. Not our focus. When lawyers want to hire us, they're looking for someone to what we refer to be as their shadow, right? We're hiring a shadow for somebody who's going to do a lot of the drafting, client communications, answer phones, and be what the lawyer is, just what they really don't want to do. And the same thing for accountants and, for CFAs. But when they're expanding outside of those departments, we realize it's just not what we do, or we don't our interviewing, our placement isn't as accurate. We're hiring folks and competencies that we don't understand, right? And IT has to be one of the broadest categories of professional labeling ever. What do you do? I work in IT. Great, right? What does that even mean? And so we stopped doing that, and then we've started taking on strategic partners that we refer out to. Like, oh, you want an IT person? We know a company that can do that. You want engineering? Where do you want it? You want it South America? Do you want it in Southeast Asia? Do you want it in Europe? And we'll make a referral for you. And we've just learned, much like you're not filing taxes. It's just not what we do well. It doesn't add any value to the organization.
I think it's important for business owners to realize their strength and do that. Because as we discussed a little bit earlier, it's so much client. Like there's not lack of client. Like there's millions of clients, and you can't even deal with them. Just find your own. What you do. It could be an industry. It could be service. It could be whatever. But find your own niche and kind of kill it and nail it down. I think that will help the growth of the firm or the company significantly. Now, let me go back to you, Cody. Here, as a CEO, obviously, I'm looking to grow and find ways of improving my operation. I have never worked with a virtual assistant myself. Okay. How can me as a CPA firm or other CPA firms utilize telehelp or your services to kind of improve our operations? I would like to hear a little bit.
Emil, that is a great question, and it's oftentimes the first thing I answer on most of my calls. I'll use your business as an example, right? Your organization, your team members, your accountants stateside are oftentimes doing a lot of non-specialized tasks. Oftentimes in the accounting space, it's bookkeeping. And so you're talking about going through, tracking the hours and everything, making sure that they're in line, that they're getting billed out correctly. That doesn't take a CPA, right? That doesn't take someone with years of experience in high pay. Oftentimes in that case, we have folks who would hire Mexico accountants, educated, experienced in GAAP, to do those tasks that don't require a CPA. We also have folks who, being that you have a client list, you have a stable of clients, communicating with them is important, checking in with them is important, making sure that they're getting timely responses to their inquiries, making sure they're getting the things that they need back from you, or that you're getting the things you need from them. And so a lot of those ancillary pieces that go around what we refer to as like the core license task, right? There are things that you and your accounting team can only do because you're US based experts, right? However, a lot of those little things like the bookkeeping, the communication, the scheduling, the requesting, and the pushing of information to the clients, that's usually given down. We find that folks in those competencies, lawyers, accountants, and CFAs, what they'll do is they hire folks with a like pedigree through us so that they can have someone who understands the business and does all those more mundane tasks so that they can focus on either A, making it to the soccer game, right? Which is my primary focus. I myself, me as an individual, I represent 5 virtual staff members. So aside from my normal headquarters company, right? I have 5 people who are me. They're me on LinkedIn, they're me on Facebook, they're my emails, they're my bookkeeping for me personally and my own holdings. They're my real estate management. And so I hand off a lot of tasks on the everyday things that need to be done. And then I just make decisions, right? And so they do that. Or there's the other side when people come to us. You have smaller firms that are saying, wow, I have so much going on, but adding in another US accountant would cost me 80 to 100 grand a year. And so now that's a huge cost just for me to get a little bit more ability to take on more clients. Well, oftentimes people will say, instead of doing that, they'll hire out someone to take up all the mundane tasks from their existing either individual schedule or team schedule, so that those folks can be freed up to manage more clients. And so that's usually it's usually what people hire us for.
Are the people that we hire through you here, are they good? They communicating with clients also? Do you really throw them out and communicate with your clients?
Oh, absolutely. So what we say is we hire the top 1% of Mexico. So everyone we hire, they've spoke English. And I say this because my kids go to school in Mexico. And I know the school that these folks go to or have gone to their entire life. They're very nice private schools. And so from day one, from elementary school, they're speaking English in school. They're speaking English and Spanish all the way up. So they're going through English school, they're well educated in basics, and then they go to university. And so oftentimes they'll go to specialized university, Monterrey, Guadalajara, Ciudad de Mexico universities that focus on this finance side and the legal side. And so they're well educated, what we refer as the top 1%. So oftentimes we screen for even something as always not important to people, something as sensitive as an accent. So maybe someone speaks really great English, but they have a really thick accent, depending on what part of Mexico they're from.
Well, I'm not the right person to comment on that with my accent. So.
You have a great accent. No, often it's sensitive. So California, never a problem with our client.
Yeah.
Iowa, definitely a problem with our clients, right? We have folks in Indianapolis who are hiring. They are looking for someone with a minor accent because most of their clients are going to be, Midwest Americans, and they're not, they don't do accents that well. And so, usually that's the case. But what we're important and what's unique about us is we're a boutique firm, right? One thing, we're not chasing anyone's business. Business comes to us. And so when we do that, oftentimes someone will say, hey, Cody, this is the job we're seeking to be done. And what we do is we reverse engineer that job to be done into a profile for a person. And then that includes like Myers-Briggs test, and that includes a detailed job description. And then we find that person. Sometimes they're in our network, sometimes they're on the open market. And so we don't have like a stable virtual assistant just waiting for someone to call us, because we can't possibly know what Emil is going to need inside his firm in Glendale until we talk to him, have him give his input. So we hire specifically to the person and to the need. And sometimes, depending on our firms, maybe one person's this way and maybe they need a different person that's this. And so we hire to the job.
Awesome. That's great. I think that's very valuable what you guys doing, for especially the way business world is going with remote. Like, even if they are here, they're not coming into the office, they're working from home anyway. So what's the matter? What's the difference?
Well, I'm sure you understand this too. There are any law firm can hire a phone answering service, right? But are they going to hire someone who's going to know their business? Oftentimes it'll ring 10 times and get transferred to a call center, but that person is just there to take notes and then send it back to them. They're not picking it up as if they were that firm. They're not embodying that firm's image. Having someone that it works specifically for you not only allows you to maintain your brand image, but also allows you to task them for whatever you want them to do. Our rule is, as long as it doesn't break the law, right? That virtual staff member, you hired them to be an accountant, but maybe you need them to respond to LinkedIn messages, right? So they respond to LinkedIn messages. And so it allows you the flexibility that you would have with, say, a normal employee, versus just saying, I want someone to do my bookkeeping. They log into QuickBooks, they do the bookkeeping, and then they leave. Versus like, okay, I go into this account every week. I know what Cody's doing at telehelping every week, and I know how Cody's business operates. And so that individual person becomes familiar with those accounts versus just seeing them as another checkbox. And so we work in the business of being, I like the word, consistency is my favorite word. Intentions, one of my other favorite word, and then being genuine. And so those things make up what our services are.
I like it, and I like that you guys are specializing in the South America area, because there are obviously similar services in Philippines and in India, but I know I have clients that work with Philippines and India, but also South America, and you see the difference because first of all, it's closer culture to at least California.
Correct.
But then also time zone is a lot smaller. Also, the difference in time zone, so it's a lot easier to work with people in Mexico than it is with India or the Philippines. So
a huge parallel time zones is one of the biggest reasons why Mexico, being that my wife's from Mexico, I'm now a dual citizen in Mexico. All this makes it much easier now after the years of running the company, but I've learned over the time, and that America, United States, and Mexico are really closely tied to each other in terms of relationship. Yeah. And like you said, California and Mexico, right, really closely tied. Texas, New Mexico, things like that. And so it makes it much easier. I was joking the other day, since Trump's in the business of just deleting things, if he could get rid of daylight savings time, I'd be grateful. Right. Mexico got rid of daylight savings time a couple years back, and no one told me. And so we were just used to always being Central Standard time zone. Very few parts of Mexico is Pacific Standard Time, and very, very few is Eastern Standard Time. Most of it's Central. But now, sometimes it's Mountain, sometimes it's Central. I'm like, can we just get rid of it, please? Like, if you're in the business of abolishing things, can that be abolished?
I think they're discussing it right now. Actually, I if I'm not mistaken, it's on the plate too. Hopefully, yeah, I agree with you. It's first of all, I hate it because it's so dark in the mornings you wake up. I like the sun.
Correct. No, that's great. And I think that what you're doing and who you represent is most of what our clients are. I love folks that are passionate about their business. They're dialed in and enjoy doing it every day. And then I also enjoy the fact that they're far more complex than just, accountants may have a reputation of being boring, right? Because all they think about is accounting, but I don't think that's the case with you. And I appreciate the well-roundedness that you represent.
Appreciate it, Cody. Appreciate it. I enjoy it. This is what I would do. If I would go back and choose again, I would do exactly the same thing. I would not choose anything else. And I think that's what it comes back to. Pick a field that you really enjoy. Again, not necessarily that I had to be an accountant, but running an accounting firm or running a business the way you're running your firm, it just wakes us up in the morning. It's amazing.
Are they aspiring accountants, or
I'm sorry, I lost you for a second. Did I drop you?
No, sir. I hear you.
You hear me? I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, you're fine. I was going to ask you if your kids were aspiring accountants. I just spoke to a lawyer yesterday. His children are in the arts. So a lawyer, and both of his kids are in the art side. Where are your children? Do they want to be accountants?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that they would go in my footsteps. My oldest son, he's definitely the creative guy. He's in arts and he does fantastic paintings and he goes to art class. So he's not going to become an accountant for sure. The younger one, he's 8. No, I don't think so. It doesn't sound sexy enough for younger kids to get into accounting nowadays. But I think it's important. It doesn't matter if they become accountants or not. I think it comes back to what you did. You went back and kind of studied it. As long as they understand it. And it's our responsibility as parents to teach them at younger age the value of money. And they can't understand accounting right now, but they can start gradually understanding the value of money and how to handle money. And I think a good tip that I usually give people that I know is put your kids on payroll. My youngest one is probably too young, but the older one is 12. He gets a small salary from me from the company for work he does. He comes in, he does some shredding, he helps us out in the office. I give him a small salary for him to kind of use for his own expenses, to understand the value of money. And I noticed a big difference. He spends that a lot more wisely than if I would give him the same amount of money. So
no, it is very smart. I mean, I'm the only person who works in my family. My wife does manage from a distance our restaurants, and so she does that. I've helped her develop managerial layers to ease her burden, so she only does really a handful of hours of work per week. But I've put my kids on the payroll for one, to divert income, right, and to avoid tax, right? They 401ks for them, life insurance policies for them, payroll for them, because one day, I do plan on not leaving them anything, right? And so what I do leave them is something that I've given them all along, right? Which is what you're doing. I can't wait for my, my daughter is already there, but my other kids to start doing little tasks and work because they have to understand it. I think that I recently had a guest who was sitting here saying, he's like, yeah, I had to start help explain to my children that when I'm sitting at my desk and in my office, like I'm doing things that allow me to earn something to buy them toys, to buy them food, right? When I'm here, I'm actually doing something to make something that benefits the family. And I think that what you said is you're giving them the value of money, which oftentimes it's not it doesn't happen. The handoff doesn't take place. Oftentimes kids do not understand that, oh, wow, dad had to do something, mom had to do something for me to have all these tangible things or this education experience. But it's, it takes work.
It takes work, but I think it's worth it. It's worth it because you're transferring knowledge that it's a lot more worth than any dollar amount you want to put on it.
No, man, I agree. And sir, as we're wrapping up here, I really want to know for the folks listening, how do we get in contact with you? Like I said, we have a large group of legal folks who follow us. And how would they get in contact with you if they realize after watching this, they're like, oh, darn, I don't know my numbers. I'm not billing correctly or something like that.
Yeah. I'm on my email daily basis. So email is the best if you want to reach me directly. Just my first name, Emil, EMIL at councilcpas.com. That's the best way of reaching me directly. Just search me on Google. On LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I try to post regularly some tips and some for law firms, how to do it, tax tips, operational tips. So you'll find a lot of valuable information on LinkedIn, on Instagram. So just search for Emil Abedian or Council CPAs. I'll pop up. But if you want to reach me directly, email me, and I'm responding to all my emails. Still, I'm doing that myself. Maybe soon I will have one of your assistants do it for me.
I'm sure a handful of emails have gone off for me during this meeting. That's the people always ask me how I have the time to take an hour every day to do a podcast. It's because it doesn't stop with me. After I'm done with you, I'm going to go to an ultrasound visit with my wife. Life's still going to go on. Work's still going to happen. When I stop working for the day, the company's still going forward. I have an executive project manager. Her whole job is to make sure my presence continues on, even if I'm not in the meeting. And so it's a great mix. I hope to one day give you the opportunity to experience it. And for those who are listening, if for some reason you don't find that rewind button and you can't find the email that Emil was able to share with us, it's very easy, bottom left-hand corner. You can always respond, comment on the post, email us at info@thefacespodcast.com, and my team will make sure that you are connected. And Mel, it has been a pleasure. I was excited to come into this, and it really did not disappoint, truly.
Awesome, man, Cody. I really enjoyed it also. Thank you so much for having me. And I learned something new today. So I appreciate you sharing it.
I appreciate it. Well, sir, you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for jumping on.
Enjoy. Take care.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.